Hey guys, Noel here, and it's Friday afternoon, and I actually have a request for the theology and philosophy section of my YouTube channel, and this request comes from my best friend's friend who lives in Seattle, who I'm Facebook friends with, but I've never actually talked to, and since she lives in Seattle, we will switch snapbacks. Got my head stubble going, and we'll switch from the New York Mets snapback, who are the awesomest team in the existence of everything, to the Mariners snapback. So this is the old school Seattle Mariners, who I really, really, really like this hat. I got it from my step uncle's baseball card shop. He's got some legit 80s snapbacks, and actually I think I'm going to go there after this video and pick up a Dodgers or a Cardinals one. He's running low, so don't buy them before me. So anyway, let's get down to it. Let's see what Megan wants me to talk about today. And first off, Megan, thanks for watching my videos. So, my buddy Andrew goes, Megan has a video request for you. She wants you to talk about this quote. If the all-powerful God controls Satan, he's an accomplice. If he doesn't, he's not an all-powerful God. So I quickly responded in Messenger, God allows free will even for Satan. And Andrew goes, Megan thinks that makes God complicit. So I want to talk a little bit more in video form as opposed to just, two messages back and forth through an intermediary. So anyway, this is how I'll try to answer this question. First off, I'll say that my knowledge of Nietzsche comes mainly through philosophy lectures through the Teaching Company. Mainly through Rick Roderick, who is a philosophy professor at Duke, who I think is a really good philosophy teacher. So take my knowledge of Nietzsche for whatever it's worth based on the fact that, I'm not someone who's dove into a bunch of Nietzsche's texts. I do have a Nietzsche reader, and I've got the Genealogy of Morals, and I've thumbed through those, but I spent a lot of time listening to lectures about postmodernism and existentialism and Nietzsche through this professor Rick Roderick. So that's going to kind of be my base of where I talk about Nietzsche from. So anyway, Nietzsche, in terms of my understanding of him, first of all, his life was a train wreck. So that doesn't mean that we should discount everything that he says, but it means that we should take it with a grain of salt. Nietzsche, I think, was someone who lived in 19th century Germany. He was kind of controlled and emasculated by his mother and sister. He, I don't think, could ever succeed at life professionally the way that he wanted to. I think he felt alienated and emasculated, and he blamed Christianity, which was the dominant religious ideology of the day, for his failings. So, and I think he took a lot of what he didn't like about himself, the fact that he felt weak, and the fact that he resented others who he felt were undeserving. And so he took his own weakness and resentment and then projected them on Christianity and formed a critique of Christianity based on what he didn't like about himself. And you can take that for whatever it's worth. That's just my understanding of Nietzsche and the spirit of his critique against Christianity. So, back to Nietzsche, one thing that he really values is freedom. Nietzsche has a quote about God that says, I don't believe in God because if there was a God, how could I bear not to be one? I'd be a slave if I wasn't God, because that would mean that I would be subjected to something, right? And while I think that statement is wrong, and I think kind of dangerous if you play it out too much, I am going to use the principle of freedom, which Nietzsche loves, apparently, to defend God against Nietzsche's critique. Namely, that God allows his creations the luxury of freedom. I think God, to the extent that we can understand what God is and to the understanding that we can, to the extent that we can understand what the devil and angels are, I'll say this, that God is on a plane above and beyond what human mental capacity is, in the same way that what exists in a painting is on a level beneath what the artist is, right? So, to go way off topic, I drew this caricature of George Brett after the Mets lost the World Series, right? I'm reflected in this caricature in various ways. It's not me. It's not the same thing as me drawing myself, but it's two-dimensional. I'm three-dimensional. And if we apply that to God, he's something above what we are. So, in the sense that God is all-powerful, that's how I would describe God being all-powerful, is that he exists on a plane beyond us. And because of that, we can't, I think, completely understand God. We can do our best, based on our biological and intellectual capacities, to draw analogies with God and what we understand and what our language can understand, and do that as best we can to try to understand God. But I don't think we're ever going to really be able to do it. That doesn't mean I don't think we should try. And, part of the attempt to understand God, coming from what people are capable of doing based on their own experiences, their own biological structures, their own intellectual processes, and their own observations between parent and children, is that a parent, at least in our culture, which is something I think we can understand, wants their child to grow into a strong, good-hearted adult who doesn't need to be completely, or hopefully at all, controlled by the arbitrary force of the parent, right? So the parent wants the child to have freedom. The parent is smart enough to, figure out what the child is going to do or not do. But the parent can, maybe suspend disbelief, maybe hope that they could be surprised, pleasantly surprised by what they create. And I think that is the spirit in which God operates. To the extent of what Satan is, or what the devil is, or whatever, or what angels are, I don't think that angels are men in robes with wings. I think those are metaphors based on Greek mythology, or which are fine. But I'd use the Platonic, the Platonist idea from Plato, that there are forms of truth that exist, and that what we would call angels are those kind of concepts of truth, to the extent that those concepts of truth have some kind of independent capacity of their own. They have kind of like a mind of their own or something like that may be above and beyond us. I don't know. I do think that there is some, based on Christian theology, some truth to that. But the idea is, if you look at, and this is from Hegel, God is the ultimate idea, right? That means other ideas are lesser than God. And if the devil is the idea that is closest to God but lesser than, that would mean that it's almost, what the devil represents is almost true, is deception, right? It's the worst kind of deception. It's the most malicious kind of deception. The kind of truth that you can, the kind of lie that you can rationalize and do terrible things to yourself and other people with, right? And this is in the book of Genesis, the creation story, which I don't take literally, but I think that it has eternal, incredibly powerful truth embedded into it. Which is namely that God gives Adam and Eve everything that they need, except for the kind of knowledge without him, right? And so he leaves them with the freedom to enjoy everything that he gave them. And the devil comes along and says a bunch of half-truths and gets Adam and Eve to ruin paradise, with the half-truths that he gives them and with the half-truths and lies that they consume by internalizing the knowledge of good and evil, right? Adam and Eve are told, well, look, by the devil, it's like, well, God likes knowledge. God knows the difference between good and evil. You want to like God and be like God, right? Go for it, It's like, well, but God told us not to. And he's like, come on, just do it anyway, God's stupid. And, I'm making this very broken down and, so like an elementary school student can understand it, but that's essentially it. He deludes this kind of concept of Satan, or this intellect of Satan, or this force of Satan, however you want to call it, is something that deludes people into thinking that they can have truth without God. Jesus was asked in the New Testament, if we're still reasoning through Christian theology, which is what I'm doing, so I'm defending it, what is the greatest law, by the Pharisees? And Jesus says, because they're trying to trip him up, because he's like, oh, well, you think this law is better than this law, but it's really not, and they try to suck him into a mind game. And Jesus says, love God with all your heart and treat others the way that you want to be treated. And so that whatever you do, you have that anchoring what you do, and so you're connected to God's truth and elementary morality, right? But, at the same time, back to this question of why does God allow the devil to be free? Sadly, in a sense, the devil is God's child. So, that idea that he created, he allows to be free. Because that's what a parent does to their children. It's just that child just really did terrible things with that freedom, that idea that, skepticism, which is a good thing, when detached from God, can become a terrible thing. It's the difference between a vaccine and a disease, right? A vaccine is the same thing as a disease. It's just it just appreciates, it has a kind of a purpose that serves the body. What a disease is a vaccine that doesn't know, that forgets it's a vaccine or something, it's a little, that's kind of a forced analogy, but I think it's something that is helpful. Cells are supposed to divide to serve the body, right? So that the body can grow and repair itself. But when cell division loses the interest of the body and starts kind of doing its own thing, it turns into cancer. Cancer's out of control. Cell division, so you're getting tumors, and then the body falls apart. So cell division, it's not that cells shouldn't divide. It's not that God shouldn't create this form of skepticism or suspicion or analysis of absolute truth. It's just when that kind of turns in a vengeful way to distort truth and not serve the higher purpose of God that you start getting problems. This is that's my answer. I just think that God values freedom the same way that Nietzsche values freedom, that God is something that's never going to be able to be completely understood, but something that we can, I think, safely discern that exists. And I have other videos where I talk about that I'm sure you've seen. And that's it. So, Megan, thanks for your interest. And thanks for your city having such cool baseball hats, because they're very nice. All right, until next time, my name is Noel. You take care, and feel free to respond to me in the comments section or private message on Facebook or YouTube or whatever. So, see ya. Bye.